Welcome to the Restored Living Podcast. We're your hosts, Josh and Jalen Harrell.
We are a husband and wife who are passionate about partnering with people to rebuild, restore, and renew their lives to the purpose God has for them.
In 2018, God took our broken marriage and restored it to something beautiful, and we believe He wants to restore the parts of your life that seem broken too.
Join with us as we talk openly about what it looks like to walk out restoration in Jesus and what it means to let the cracks in our story become the greatest evidence of God's love for us.
This is Restored Living.
I'm not ready.
I'm not ready.
Why'd you
Josh
start
says
early?
I didn't think it would go that fast.
It goes that fast every time.
No, it doesn't. I don't think it does.
Okay.
Anyway,
Well,
welcome to the Restored Living Podcast. You get sultry, Jalen, today because
sultry.
I have a sinus infection and I'm like on the tail end of it, hopefully. Or maybe
Please,
I'm just
God.
in the middle, but I hope not. But you get sultry, Jalen, radio voice, I think.
It sounds pretty sultry.
Doesn't it? I think
it's very
so.
radio voice. Oh, I love it.
At least you don't have like a really whiny voice. I don't even think I could imitate one. I was singing in worship this morning. We were at home and just sitting on our couch singing. I just could not. Like
No voice left.
You know when you're sick, when you can't hit some notes that you normally do. And you're just like, well, I sound like a rabid dog or a squeaky mouse or a boy going through puberty.
It's like that penguin in Toy Story when he loses his squeaker. So it's just like,
Oh, it's
That's what
so
it's like.
sad.
It's so sad.
Was that the
We had to
second one?
I don't remember. There's so many at this point. They're doing another one, I think.
Are they really?
Anyway, yeah. I don't
Toy
know
Story
how.
7 million. Oh,
But we
geez.
did church from home today because between a sinus infection and 2 kids puking yesterday, there was no way we were walking through those doors.
Yeah, some of you guys saw the video I posted on Instagram stories, maybe.
Sitting on our couch.
Sitting on our couch, and Declan was singing, and it was
It was
so
very
cute.
sweet. I'm grateful for live stream for those days where you can't make it to church.
Yes,
Kinda nice to
it
have.
makes you feel like you're part of the body without being
Mhm.
part of the body. I'd much rather be at church.
Always, yeah. But
But I
Well, that's all you got.
digress. There you
anyway.
go. That's where we're at the Restored Living Podcast. This is Catch Up with Jalen and Josh. I'm Jalen.
I'm Josh, obviously. If she's Jalen, I'm Josh.
My name is Frank.
Oh man, it's
I'm
gonna be a
Jorge.
good one.
I'm
to-
a speckle.
We're back. We haven't been podcasting in a month. I'm ignoring the fact that you just did that.
That's rude.
I'm hard.
What if I do the whole thing that way?
Welcome to the Restored Living Podcast.
Have you guys ever? Okay, many of you have probably seen Encanto,
Duh, of course, it's the best. It's the
and
best,
not
yes.
like spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it, you've been living under a rock. But
It's been a couple of years. I think we can spoil it.
what is his name?
Bruno.
Bruno, the uncle that is like shunned,
Shunned from
who
the
can
family.
see from the future, the prophet that is lost.
Exiled.
And he's
Uh.
living in the walls of the house because he still wants to be part of the family.
Yeah.
And he's like got multiple personalities, and one is Jorge.
That's what happens when you live alone. You go crazy. This is why we need people. So we don't develop multiple personalities.
This is true.
Anyway, yes, it has been a month since we did a podcast because just fall and things going on and stuff
Am I taking
happening.
up too much space? Sorry. You
No,
want to
you're
scoot
good.
over?
You're good. You're good. You take
We're
up
just
all the space
adjusting.
that you need.
Oh, man.
man. Anyways, we are adjusting back. It's now at the time that we're recording this. We're well into November now.
November is going to go by real
So
quick.
quickly. So, with that being said, we should dive in because,
I thought we were going to do housekeeping first.
well, that's what I mean. Dive into
Oh,
housekeeping.
yes. Go
That's where
for
we dive
it.
in. Housekeeping.
There we go.
She's looking at me waiting for it. So a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, we want to just give you guys a couple little updates. So one is that we did officially last month finish our certification. I don't know if last time we
Yay.
recorded, if that was, we haven't finished yet, have we?
I don't think so.
Maybe, I don't know, because it was only a couple weeks ago, a few
Yeah.
weeks ago.
Mhm.
So we finished our certification. So we are now officially certified biblical trauma informed coaches.
That is our
Sounds like a
title.
mouthful,
We have a
but
title now.
we give all of that because it all matters. So we went through, if you don't know, went through a 2-year certification process with an organization called Freedom Movement, led by Carrie Garcia and her team. which if you haven't already kind of connected into what they're doing, go find them on Instagram. You can find Carrie at just Carrie Scott Garcia, and then you can find Freedom Movement.
Freedom Movement.
Freedom Movement. And Carrie has been doing this work for the last 20 plus years in trauma-informed coaching, and then now certifying individuals in the last couple of years. So we just finished with our class of I think there were 50 of us, right? 50 coaches.
50 other people.
And so we're super excited about that. We have poured a lot of our time and especially a lot of our resources and money and energy and capacity into this work because it is so important to us and because it's been so transformative in our lives. So all that to say, we're really, really excited. Some of you who have given to the ministry, you helped us get there by supporting us financially. And so we want to thank you guys for that. That is huge. This last trip, it was able to help cover the costs of our travel, which is the biggest expense a lot of the time.
And such a relief to us because we have been shelling that all out, even as we've been going through all of these financial things we've been telling you guys about. And God has been good in providing the funds for what we're wanting to do. And I'm excited for what this certification means for you guys. You know, we plan on launching quite a few things in 2025, including some group coaching,
some online courses,
and so every donation that you make to the ministry helps that happen. We were just on the phone with another ministry talking about how we can provide resourcing to each other. So we're just excited for you guys to get more of what Restored Living is. I mean, you guys get such a little bit of it on the podcast, but so many of you are asking for more. And so we're excited to bring you more.
Yeah, very excited for that. And so that kind of launches into our second thing, which is that starting this month, middle of November, so November 15th, we are going to launch a 4-week, what did you call it? You had a name for it.
A 4-week,
Restored Living Gives Thanks.
Yes,
that's what it's called.
That's exactly what it is.
And what it is it's going to be a 4-week initiative to invite you guys to partner with us in this ministry. And specifically, what we are doing is we are aiming to raise funds for 2025 to cover essential ministry costs, primarily to cover the cost of services for individuals who are needing our help and who are needing someone to walk alongside them. We get pretty frequently messages from individuals and couples who really need support, who need something beyond just like somebody to talk to, but they need somebody who is trained, who understands trauma, who understands how the brain and the body work, which is what we've been working on for the last couple of years. And a lot of times they're in a place where just financially it's really hard for them to afford. So we will pretty much always discount our services. And even then, sometimes it's difficult for people when they've got families to take care of and they have, sometimes multiple jobs, and there's just lots of different things. So we decided this last year that we wanted to be a ministry that is primarily donor driven. And what that means is that we would then be able to offer services to people at a very discounted price or free for a period of time as well, if they're needing that, because we want to make sure we get this to people when they need it and where they need it. So obviously for people who want to pay for our services, we work with them as well. But for the people who come along who can't, we want to be able to give them options. So in that 4 weeks, we're really going to be focusing on inviting you guys into that mission with us, with being a part of that. If you choose to partner with us on either a one-time gift or a monthly gift, whatever it is that you are able to do, those are going to be the focuses of our next 4 weeks, essentially.
Yeah, we'll give you more details in a podcast here real soon.
Yeah.
Probably in the next week or two.
Yeah. So we wanted to give you guys a little teaser into that, just so you can know that that's coming up as we prepare for the next ministry year. And then the last thing I would say is just, again, we invite you guys to just share this as much as you can. So whether that's sending it to a friend, whether that's sharing it on social media, if you find it helpful to you or encouraging to you, or you think it might be helpful for someone that you know, we just ask you to share it and send it along to them.
Yeah,
anything
I agree.
else you could think of?
I mean, no, we just thank you guys for loving the podcast. I mean, we hear from you guys every week on Instagram, and we haven't quite delved totally into YouTube, but we plan to do that.
We've dabbled.
We've dabbled, actually, and I have lots of ideas for YouTube that I'd like to implement.
Yeah.
I just need the time to do that. So there's that. And thanks for being patient we wanted to record so much earlier than this, but life just we had
just going with
kids'
the pace.
Birthdays and rite of passage trips and just all, and the election happened, and that was a whole thing. You guys really loved that podcast about politics, so you're welcome.
That struck a chord for sure.
The Lord was speaking clearly in that, and even today, a quick note about politics and everything, because there is a lot of either fear on one side or like immense joy and not caring about the other side. And I want to just encourage you guys that like politics is not the enemy, and that the Lord is sovereign over all. Like the same message applies as before the election that applies after. And so, you know, if you have friends who are really struggling with fear and you don't understand that, try and live in their shoes for a minute. Try and empathetically listen to what the reason they are fearful is because of something in their story. And so I had a conversation this week with someone, and they were very fearful about what's going to happen over the next 4 years. And they don't know Jesus, right? So I understand why. If you don't know Jesus, you're going to be fearful. The government does control the things that you do in a sense, or your beliefs, or all sorts of things. And so, you know, what I want to encourage you with friends and family members is remember you're talking to a human being, and also remember that people just want to be heard. Right? People just want to be heard, and we don't have to have the same beliefs, but you can seek to understand and not have to be right or not have to change their mind, but extend an olive branch of sorts to them as a form of love.
Yeah, it's a good reminder.
Yeah.
We need that. We need that.
We do, don't we?
Well, let's get into today's topic.
Let's dive in to sacrificial living.
Yes. Yeah. You're singing that very joyful for this the title that it is. It is joyful. And it's hard. So we're gonna dive into that. Now, this topic, it's funny, we were talking before this about like what do we want? Like what's the point we want to get across, or what's the answer to
we really felt like the Lord was like, you need to talk about sacrificial living, because it's come up a few times this week.
Yeah. And I looked at Jay and I was like, I don't have answers for people. This is not a big question mark, but it's just a very open-ended thing in my own heart and mind right now with the Lord, of what it looks like to live a life of sacrifice. And the question she asked me was like, well, why? Like, why would we choose to live a life of sacrifice? Right. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I know the biblical answer, but I don't know the, I think it's more of a head knowledge thing right now for me than is a heart knowledge thing. So we're going to talk about that. We're just going to get into it, and we'll just see what the Lord does and what he speaks. And so that is, that's the concept that we're going to talk around today, is sacrificial living, and why does it matter, and why choose to live a life of sacrifice in a world that really doesn't support or encourage that.
Yeah. In fact, I feel like in this day and age, you really don't need to sacrifice much to live. You know, I think historically, like about what the role of like a stay-at-home mom, let's say, the role of a mom was back in the day. Right. When there was no, there's no online thing you can do from home. Like, you're with the kids, you're doing it. Right. And your husband's out working, and you can really survive off of one income. Right. They're working all day. The mom is home with the children. There's a lot going on at home. Like sometimes you're making your own food and you're doing your own things. And there's a sacrifice to that. Just like the man who is going out and working, there's a sacrifice to that too. Yeah. And why do we do those things? And so, I wanted to dive deeper into there, because I feel like technology lately has made it so that we don't have to sacrifice as much, but I don't know if that's helping us or harming us.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
So I think about our kids, right? Like, as I was cleaning our house today, our house, 3 boys, our house, and a dog. 3 boys and a boy dog who sheds, and he's in his shedding season. I mean, I feel like we vacuumed 3 times today already, and it's not even 2:00.
Yes, we did.
Crazy. And there was part of me that got frustrated. I'm like, these kids just play their video games and watch TV and, not a care in the world, because we take, not that our kids don't do things. I just want to point that out. They do stuff, but they don't nearly do the stuff that we do. And the mess is still there. And it was just a reality check for me of are my kids sacrificing enough to benefit the well-being of the family? Right? Are they saying no to their things that they want to do? Right. for the betterment of our family, because we do need them to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And we want to teach them to do that, because there will be a time when they are adults where they will have to sacrifice the things that they want to do personally to better their own families.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a real importance in sacrifice, especially like when you think about marriage. Marriage is all about sacrifice.
Yeah. Well, and I think you know, if you look at the generation that's growing up now, you know, 16, 18 to mid 20s, even late 20s, we see a lot of that aversion to sacrifice. That is, I think it has grown in each generation, right? So you think back to like baby boomers, right? And things like that. I think that there was a sense of work ethic and sacrifice there that probably went too far, but to some degree, there was a sense of like, if you go through something like the Great Depression, your family lives through that, you have a sense of like, let's not be over extravagant with our lives, right? Because we don't want to, let's sacrifice like maybe nicer things because we need to be careful and mindful and things like that. And I think the further we've gotten away from that, we have now swung too far the other way, where we just want ease and convenience all the time. And so now what we're seeing in ourselves, but also in the next generation coming up, is people that don't want to sacrifice anything, right? They want to have what they want all the time. And so
you see this when you eat at like a restaurant and you bring, like, not to call out the iPad parents, but because we've been those parents. And I've actually realized with our older two boys, we did the iPad thing at restaurants, and with Caden, we really don't.
Yeah.
And the reason we don't do it, or it's a very last resort, right, is because sorry guys, you're gonna have to deal with my coughing because that's just how it's gonna roll today. The inconvenience that it is for us to pay attention to our kids so that we can have a meal out that's quiet and calm, and that's not who kids are, right? Like, Caden doesn't want to just sit down at a restaurant and eat, right? But there are important times where he has to do the sacrifice of being at a restaurant and sitting and eating. Yeah. And that's important, right? Like, we have to teach him that. Yeah. But at the same time, I need to not be upset about the fact that he's a 2-year-old wanting to run around because he thinks it's so cool that we're in this new place. And every place is a jungle gym. And it's a sacrifice is very much a give and take of loving one another. Something that is so hard actually leads to so much love. And when we're not willing to sacrifice for the other person, it creates this wall between us that is isolating. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I think when we're thinking about the purpose behind living a life sacrificially, right? Like I even think about we're so hesitant to give up our time or our resources to other people. Not everyone, but I think as a society, as a Western society as a whole, we're very individually minded.
Especially right now with the way our economy is.
Right. And so we're just very, very closed fist with our resources, with our time, with our relationships, right? We'll only give so much. Like I think about, we see a lot of younger adults, even people in their 20s to 30s, who are really like over the idea of marriage or committed relationships, because the real reason is because they require so much sacrifice. Like you hear people bragging about like, all these, I've seen, several videos. It's usually women. I don't really know why. That probably because of bad experiences they've had in the past with men or whatever. But I'm making an assumption there. But where they're just like bragging about the fact that they don't have to take care of anyone else and they don't have to answer to a spouse and their money is all theirs and they get to travel and work the career they want to work and all these things. And it's just interesting to me because I'm like, yeah, you get to do all of that, but there's like a selfishness to it. And there's men that do it too. Like, I don't think it's one-sided. The times I've seen those videos, it tends to be women, but I think there's men too.
I think guys who like want to sleep around.
Well, like men historically have been more like that. I think women are just now being like that too. So men probably laid the groundwork for that, honestly. but this sense of like, I don't want to be responsible to another person or to children. I want to, I want to work as little as possible. Like, it's just this sense of,
the not having children thing. That's huge.
yeah. And
I think a lot of people
there's-
aren't having kids right now because they're scared that kids will ruin their life.
Well, there's that, and there's the financial piece of people who are like, well, how am I going to make that work? I'm like, well, you just do. Like, your desire to love and raise a human
That's so
supersedes
true.
your desire to like be perfectly financially secure all the time and have everything you want. Like, there's just I'm not saying it's easy. We talk about often how the Lord's just making it work for us with the economy the way it is, having as many kids as we do. I mean, he provides for us, but again, if you don't have that foundation of a relationship with the Lord, then there might not be that assurance there to go, oh, okay, like God's going to provide. And there's a lot of reasons people choose not to have kids that are, again, who knows what their experience was growing up or whatever.
Right.
But again, it comes back to like, regardless of what your story has been, there's a sense of our culture gravitating towards a selfishness that is, I think, really dangerous, because to your point, it keeps us from connection. Like, you
100%.
hoard not just your money and your time, but you hoard your heart, and you're like unwilling to be open to people, unwilling to be open to God. And eventually it just leaves you really isolated. So when you live a life that's not sacrificial, you actually end up with less. Like, you end up with less of the things that actually matter, like connection and relationship and love that's coming from other people, and love that God is trying to give to you that you're just like so closed off to, because even that causes, even you have to sacrifice your own will and your own desires sometimes to have those things. And it's like, we've just decided they're not worth it.
Oh my gosh. What you said about hoarding your heart, I think that is so, it's funny how sacrifice is I think this is the definition. You can fact check me if you want, but the act of willingly letting something go is what I think about when I think about sacrifice. And maybe I'm totally wrong. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, I think it's got a working definition, because I think there's a lot of ways you can see it. I mean, there's going to be the official definitions of it, but an act of giving up something valued for the sake of, let me say that again. An act of giving up something valued for the sake of something else regarded as more important or worthy.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good definition. I love that. I mean, it's the definition, right? That's why I like it. But it is
giving up something important or valued for the sake of other considerations.
Yep. It's making ourselves lower and putting something else higher, right? When we sacrifice for something, someone,
right?
And it's so entrenched in everything that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's such living sacrificially is such an upside down world thought. And that's why it's so ingrained in the Bible, right? Like, that's why that's why we want to live like Jesus, right? Because sacrificial living actually produces so much more than we originally anticipate.
Well, and Jesus' sacrifice is what produced the hope that we have. Like, his sacrifice is what gave us the ability to be reconnected to God and to be reconnected to our Creator. And so if that was his example for us, I mean, from the beginning, he calls his people to a life of sacrifice, right? Sacrifice for the atonement of their sins before Christ came. For his people, it's like sacrifice of their will and sacrifice of their trust in their own abilities and sacrifice of their desires and their longings for things that he knew wouldn't fulfill them. And I think about, some of you might be listening to this and being like, well, I have a really good reason to not sacrifice. Like, I have been burned. I gave everything for someone or some people or for a church or whatever. And I was totally beaten down. I was neglected. I was abandoned. I was forgotten. And those things are all probably true and real.
Yeah.
I wouldn't argue any of those things. I think Jay and I could both point to moments in our life where it's like, we just felt like we sacrificed. Even now we're in a season where it just feels like, Lord, I don't know how much more we can give. Like, we are sacrificing a lot. So how much more can we give? And yet, if our stories are holding us captive from living a life of sacrifice, they're holding us captive from the life of joy that God designed us for, and the life of surrender. Because when we're unwilling to sacrifice, we're saying, this thing is more important to me. I trust this thing more than I trust you, God, whatever it might be. I trust my own
abilities,
resources, money, time.
Yep.
I trust my ability to keep myself safe. Like I trust all those things more than you.
And unfortunately, that trusting in your own ability, because we're human beings and we're fallen human beings, we're going to disappoint ourselves.
And then we're either going to be shameful towards ourselves or we're going to blame other people.
Yep.
Because someone has to take or we blame God, which is funny because we're like,
then the downward spiral of
continues.
Everything continues, and
Yeah.
sacrifice is the only thing that is able to lift us up.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like. Yeah. So there was this interesting, we told you guys a couple of times the Lord has brought sacrifice to us. And it's funny, there's a psalm that has been kind of like my anthem of 2024, and it's Psalm 20.
Yeah.
And we're only going to read the first few verses because the whole thing is great. But it was this part in verse 3 that we wanted to really like dive in on. It says, deliverance in battle. May the Lord answer you in a day of trouble. May the name of Jacob's God protect you. May he send you help from the sanctuary and sustain you from Zion. Verse 3. May he remember all your offerings and accept your burnt offering. Now, offering is another word for sacrifice. And back in biblical times, what would happen was you would have to go to a temple, right? We didn't have the Holy Spirit living inside of us back then, right? And so we would have to go to a temple. There was a priest at the temple, and that was the person that was kind of like the inner circle person to God, right? And so there were all of these sacrifice rituals that you would do.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was interesting in this verse when he kind of is redundant to himself, right? Like he says, may he remember all of your offerings and accept your burnt offering. And whenever something's said twice,
but differently,
it like usually means they're separate things, right? It's not just for emphasis. Offerings and then burnt offerings are not the same thing. And so when we looked it up, what did we notice about like the burnt offerings versus regular offerings? So first of all, what is an offering or a sacrifice?
So there were offerings that you brought, like when the scripture talks about tithing, right? Of giving of like what you have. You would bring offerings, and the priests of the temple, they did not like produce for themselves. So
it was food, right?
Yeah. So they didn't like work. They didn't like till the land, like usually it was the Levites, right? That were the priests of the nation, right?
The priests, yeah.
And so they didn't actually work. Like their call was to rely on the nation to provide for them as they served their roles as priests, which was like this community. They were there to like to connect to God on behalf of the people, right? And so when the Israelites would bring their offerings, there was a portion of it that was set aside for the priests, right? And that would be their sustenance, is what they lived off of. And then the rest was to God. The difference between an offering and a burnt offering that we found out when we looked it up was burnt offerings were offerings entirely given to God. So rather than like a portion of it going to the priest, it was like, no, this is all being burned on the altar for God. So it was like a complete and total offering that was given on behalf of the individual to God. And
usually it was like a whole, it wasn't like a purport, it was a whole animal.
So it was like their best, right? Like their best calf, their best sheep, whatever it was, they would sacrifice.
Right.
And what was interesting about that to us is that this David writing this psalm, and he's calling God to remember not just his offerings, not just the faithful givings, but like remember the times where I have given everything to you and for you. Like, and when something's burned up, like it's gone. There's no like, this isn't like you're loaning God a sacrifice. Like you are sacrificial living is like, I'm sometimes giving you things that I can't get back ever. Like it's to you and it's gone, burned on the altar. And I think about that. And
I just feel like we don't do this very often.
No, I don't think we do. I think that we, let's think about this. Things that we can give God that we can't get back would be things like our time and our money.
Right.
Because once you get rid of, like, you can earn more money, but like that money is gone or that time is gone. And so how often are we giving that complete sense of sacrifice? Like, are we giving God just like our little bit and then being like, okay, that's as much as I'm going to give?
Or are we giving what's comfortable, right? Like, I think a lot of times in sacrifice, we are sacrificing like it's, you know, right now, Samaritan's Purse does Operation Christmas Child for those of you who are at church, and you probably have seen a red and green box around. And we have one sitting in our house that we're planning on giving at church on Sunday and waiting to be filled. And it's in those moments where we're giving that sometimes I feel like it's just not very painful. Like there's not much sacrifice to it. Like we're going to go to Walmart and get probably some cheap things. It's not like anything super flamboyant or nice, and I'm not saying you need to go buy Kids in Africa, like something really, really nice or spend all the money. But I do think that when it comes to being in an uncomfortable place and giving a sacrifice in that uncomfortable place, we really shy away from it.
Yeah.
And
we don't give to the point of pain.
No. And
we give
this
like
burnt
maybe right
offering,
up to the edge of it.
They did it often.
Yeah.
Like, didn't it say something like,
I don't remember.
I can't remember, but they were constantly giving sacrifices, right? For the atonement of their sins. Like, this was how we got to get right with God and be in God's presence, right? And so back in biblical times. And so to be in a place today where Jesus has righted all our wrongs, the Holy Spirit lives in us, where does sacrifice live in our day and age today?
Yeah. I mean, I think it well, whether or not it does, it's meant to be that after Jesus came, he became the example for us of how to orchestrate our lives and how to orient our lives, right?
Right.
So like Jesus is our true north, and anything outside of that is likely going to lead us more towards self-reliance or sin or things like that. So if we're looking at Jesus's example of how he lived sacrifice, right? Like he in everything that he did not, he was the ultimate priest, like, right? Like he didn't make money for himself. He lived off of the good of other people or of his disciples or the apostles, like people who followed him, provided for him.
Yeah, Jesus did not bankroll himself, y'all. He had other people.
Yeah. And so he lived a life of giving of his time and his energy and his resources and his heart and his spirit, like everything that he could, he gave up to the point of placing himself on the altar on the cross, right? And like the cross was the ultimate offer. He was the ultimate burnt offering that was given. Yep. He gave everything of himself that he could give, right? Yep. He held nothing back. And so if we like to, I think in the church, be like, oh, I just want to be more like Jesus. And I'm like, do you though? Do I really want to be more like Jesus?
Yeah, because if you do,
being like Jesus, it's not like some light call.
No, it involves a burnt offering type living, and it's not like miserable all the time.
No, and Jesus was, I mean, it said for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. So he did it with joy and trepidation at the same time. But his ultimate conviction was the joy set before him, which was the salvation of the world. Like that was why he did what he did. So it's not that we do it out of like this somber, like lowly place where we're just like, my life is all ashes and burnt. And no, like that's like false humility. Then you're wanting everyone to look at how good you are about giving your life up. It's just living in a constant surrender of like, God, where are you asking me to sacrifice my desires today? Where are you asking me to sacrifice my wants and my needs? Is it something in my heart that I need to sacrifice? Is it something tangible that I can see with my eyes? Is it like resources? Am I being stingy with my money? Am I being stingy with my time? Like, where am I not living the way that you would live? How am I not sacrificing the way that you would sacrifice? Or where am I withholding? And those questions are going to reveal, like the Holy Spirit's going to reveal to us areas where we're not living a sacrificial life.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of times the key that we're not living a sacrificial life is we feel comfortable. Like comfort is the enemy of what the Lord wants us to do. Because it's this false notion of like, it's all good, man. And we're covered. And, like, I don't need you, Jesus. And I always, if you've ever been through something with the Lord and you've needed him every day, the sweetness of that, right? Like when we really are giving all that we have and relying on God to fill the gaps, that is true sacrifice, right? Like we've given all that we have, and Lord, we need you to fill the void. We need you to stretch our money this month. We need you to stretch our time this month because we just don't have time, And I feel like we just try not to get to that point out of fear, right? Like we miss out on the presence of the Lord that is in those times of sacrifice, right? Like that was the whole point of offerings at the temple, was to commune with the Lord in a very special way.
Right.
And now that we don't have to bring sacrifices to atone for our sins and be close with the Lord, I think it's even more important now to be aware of how comfortable our life is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it's not I mean, maybe the Lord's calling you to a life of radical discomfort where you do sacrifice even the daily comforts of life for him. I don't know. I mean, I think he calls every person to different things. And I think he calls you according to how he made you and the purpose that he placed you on this earth for and the time he placed you here. But so you might be even thinking, well, how uncomfortable, how much sacrifice is enough sacrifice, right? How much discomfort is enough discomfort? How much is he? And it's the wrong question. It's the wrong question for us to be asking. It's the wrong question for me to be asking. The question is like, how, Lord, what is going to lead me to live a life closer to you, more like you in everything that I do? And asking that question, then it really doesn't matter how much sacrifice he's asking of us, because our heart is aligned to like, Lord, I just want more of you. So if that means a lot of sacrifice, if it means a little sacrifice, if it means a lot of sacrifice today and less sacrifice tomorrow, or less today and more tomorrow, I don't care what it is how much you're asking me to sacrifice. I just want to have more of you. So I want to go where you're going. I want to do what you're doing. And this is something I wrestle with, because I'm just like, Lord, I just want reprieve. Like I want a break. I would love a break. That would be awesome. And I can't say my heart's completely in the place where I want God more than comfort every day. Like there's a lot of days that I want comfort more. I idolize comfort and I idolize security. And I just think, man, things are gonna be so much better when like this stressful time is over, or when this difficult time has passed. And that's a trap. Like it's a false sense of security, because that time never comes. There's just never a time that's like that. There's never a time where life is just free of the stress and the difficulties. Like it's just always there. And so I think, again, it's reminding ourselves to reorient our hearts to say, Lord, where are you going? Where are you asking me to go? What are you asking me to do today? What are you asking me to give today? I just want more of you, more of your presence, I want to know more of who you are. I want to be more like you. And then just like follow in that. When your heart gets distracted, or your mind gets distracted, just go, okay, Lord, nope, I just want more of you. I want to be with you. I want to be like you. Help me to do that.
Yeah. Because I do think you're right. It's, we do want, the flesh part of us wants comfort. Like we want to be delivered. We want to be saved. And
that's a good desire, because we were made for Eden, and Eden is like ultimate comfort. There is no heartache, no pain, no sorrow. You're one with God. You're in his presence. There's no strife between one another. Like that is a good, it's not to disparage that desire and be like, you shouldn't want comfort. You should absolutely want comfort. It just doesn't your God-given right. It's just not.
It doesn't come from the things you think it does, right? No. It comes from the presence of the Lord. That aching in your heart for, let's just say, your finances to be in a different spot is not because when that problem is fixed, life is better. It's actually because we live in a fallen world and only the Lord can give us security, like Josh just said, right? Because there's been times where we've had so much and we felt like we had none.
And times where we had very little and felt like we had everything.
Right.
Yeah. So
and the difference is God.
Yeah.
Right? When God is in the picture and he is filling that void that you are trying to fill with porn or food or money or
success,
whatever it is, right? Nothing will satiate that void.
Yeah.
Nothing. But the sacrifice of Jesus in that place. And
it's funny. I feel like it's when our sacrifice meets his sacrifice.
Yep.
Like when he has already sacrificed for us. We cannot experience the gift of that sacrifice if we are not sacrificing.
Well, it's like he has already built half the bridge and he's waiting for us to meet him there.
Yeah.
You know, like the bridge is there. He's just wanting us to meet him there so he can cross.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's,
and be invited into the situations where we are holding tight to our comfort and holding tight to the Eden that is very normal. And I want to reiterate that, like, the things that you desire in comfort or deliverance from, or, you know, the ease of life, that was how it was meant to be.
Yeah.
Like, we were meant to be like that. We were meant to live restored. And the Lord is so gracious in helping us to still do that, even though we turned our backs on him so long ago. And he gives us ways through sacrifice to be able to be whole again in different moments. I love this verse. Our pastor read it this morning, and I want to read it. Just goes along with like the comfort of things.
Yeah.
Where did it go? Is this it?
Yeah, if you want to just read that one part.
Which one? You read it. I can't
part.
see it for some reason.
So this is in 2 Samuel. And
sorry, I like visually didn't see it in the
but it's David is approaching this guy and is like, hey, I want to buy these things for you and sacrifice them, right? So it says, like, I can't pronounce the guy's name. Arna said to David, my lord, the king may take whatever he wants and offer it. Here are the oxen for a burnt offering and the threshing sledges and ox yokes for the wood. Your majesty, Arna gives everything here to the king. Then he said to the king, may the Lord your God accept you. And the king David answered to him and said, no, I insist on buying it from you for a price, for I will not offer to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing. David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 20 ounces of silver. He built an altar to the Lord there and offered burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Lord was receptive to, I can't read the, oh no, not receptive. I can't read the rest of it because it's blocked out. But gets the point there that David was like, I will not offer something to God that doesn't cost me anything.
He knew the value of sacrifice.
Because he's king. Like, of course, these people are like, take whatever you want. You can have it. You're the king. And he's like, absolutely not. Like, I will not. Not only was he like, I'm going to pay this man for what he's giving me because he deserves to be, but also I'm not going to give God something that's essentially worthless, right? Like, if it's been given to me for free, it doesn't cost me anything to give it away.
Right.
And this is where I think we just, again, we don't. David was a foreshadowing of Christ. Like every person that we see in scripture was like, they were imperfect examples of what Jesus was going to do. Like, they got little parts of it right, but not the whole thing because they were human, right?
Right.
But the sense of like Jesus, even, you know, in the Garden of Gethsemane, asking the Lord, like, asking the Father, if there's any way for this cup to pass from me, like, let it be so. I don't want to do this. I don't want to die. I don't want to be torn apart from you. But not my will, yours be done, because he recognized that he would not live a life that didn't cost him something. He wouldn't offer his Father something that cost him nothing. And so in the same way, the invitation for us when we walk with Jesus is to ask ourselves, what do I need to give to the point where it actually costs me something? Like, what level of sacrifice would actually, I guess, you know, this would be an instance where we could ask how much sacrifice is enough. Ask yourself, does this really cost me anything? Is it really costing me that much?
Right.
Like, am I going to feel this even if I give it away? And that's going to look different for every person in terms of what that looks like. But
why don't we talk about some examples of what it looks like to sacrificially live in like some main areas like marriage. Let's talk about with others, and then with like ourselves.
Okay. Go for it.
That sound good? Yeah. So like when you were talking about that, the first thing that comes to mind with me is the radical change that we made in our marriage, where instead of just focusing on healing our own hurts, we focused on really being there for each other. And that was a big, especially when you go through betrayal and addiction and all sorts of things where trust is broken, it is really easy to go on either side of your camps and just focus on yourself and focus on your healing. I think even when you don't go through betrayal and stuff, I find a lot of marriages can find themselves in this place where the wife is over here and the husband's over here, and they kind of come together sometimes, but then they're kind of in their own camps instead of being one camp that does many things. And so, you know, sacrificial living when it comes to your marriage is recognizing that, yes, as a wife, I have needs. And I might have needs in a certain moment, but if I see my husband and I see signs of him struggling or needing someone, that I am putting those needs not away or far away, but recognizing that I have needs I need to advocate for. And I'm seeing some needs that he also has that I want to make sure he knows I'm there for too.
Right.
And so, you know, it might look like even, you know, in the beginning, we learned this dance and it wasn't easy, right? Because not everybody is both on board for sacrificial living, right? So you both need to be on board in your marriage for sacrificial living. But this looks like coming together and having a conversation of like, look, you're my person. I'm your person. I'm going to back you up always. I am going to live sacrificially to you, but I need you to take care of me. Right?
Yeah.
Like we both have to be giving 100 to each other.
Yeah.
No, like 50-50. No, like if you give 50, then I'll give 50.
Yeah.
I'm committing. And ideally we're doing this when we make our vows to each other.
Right.
But I don't think when we're in love and making our vows to each other, we really like get this concept of sacrificial living.
Yeah.
But when you make that choice, and this usually happens between years 5 and 10, where you're like, I'm choosing to be with this person and stay committed to this person, despite the wrongs that they've done to me, that is sacrificial living.
Yeah.
That is saying, look, we made a covenant to each other. I'm going to honor that. I'm going to honor you. And Jesus has to help me with that because sometimes we just don't have it in us to do that. And so sacrificial living when it comes to your marriage, yes, God needs to be involved 100%. And if you don't see that in your own relationship with the Lord, if you don't feel like you have him with you in that, bringing unity to you and your spouse, you need to get right with Jesus first. Jesus is going to help you do this with your spouse, right? And on the flip side, Jesus in you is going to probably speak to your spouse if they're not in the same place, right? Of sacrificial living. You can't force your spouse to do it, right? But you can set an example of what the Lord's asking you to do. Anything to add?
I mean, no, I think you pretty much covered it.
I feel like a marriage is like the way that it happens.
Yeah. It's counter to, again, this is why people are like, I don't want to get married, because it is so joyful. And it also reveals all the selfishness in our hearts, right? Like the reason people don't like it is not because really that it's work. The only reason it's work is because you got problems, like you have issues. And so we all do. And so the reason it feels like work is because your issues are butting up against their issues, and your selfishness against their selfishness, and your pride against their pride, and, you know, your wants against their want. Like there's just a lot of, it's revealing the flesh in us. Like the marriages are a crucible and a refining process that make us more like Jesus if we will let them, which means that it involves sacrifice. And so I think what you said is right. Just the sense of like, advocate for yourself and let your spouse know that you will sacrifice for them. Like I will sacrifice my wants for your wants. I will sacrifice when necessary my needs for your needs, just like I know that you will do the same for me. This can't be, like you said, a one-sided thing.
Right.
Then you get the dynamic where someone's a doormat and someone else is just abusive of that willingness, right? And so
right. And please watch out for that.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
be mindful
we just want to be like very clear. Marriage is not a stomping grounds for abuse.
No. And I mean, all of this gets tabled or goes completely out the window if there's abuse happening. There's just unrepentant abuse. Just
to be clear, abuse is physical, verbal, emotional, sexual. Neglect is a big one that people miss with abuse. So if you're not like being acknowledged or you feel like forgotten or less than, that is a huge...
Yeah, that has to be addressed first.
Yes. Like there are just core, and if you wonder if maybe your marriage has some sort of abuse threat in it, please don't hesitate to text us. and call us. We're happy to do evaluations for you to see if your situation is safe or what you need to do moving forward in a situation if you don't know what to do, because every situation is unique.
Yeah.
So just wanted to throw that out there.
That's a good point.
Really quick.
So what does it look like in terms of others?
Others. Well, I feel like the marriage is going to, the reason I spent a long time on marriage is because you're going to see things mirrored in our different relationships. They're just not as vital, right? Like, I hate to put marriage on a pedestal, but it very much is the way that Christ loved the church, right? And that right?
I would say when it's done well, yes.
Right, when it's done, yes, when it's done well, that's for sure.
That's what it's meant to be.
But like with others, we don't have that commitment of like a marriage or a bond necessarily. There's so much bonding with marriage that it's such a more intimate relationship. But with others, like I think about our kids and things like that, their family, and I think about friendships that we have. Yeah. And what does it look like to live sacrificially in those times? Well, it looks like doing some things you don't want to do all the time, right? Or having grace with the people that do hurt us and being willing to have those hard conversations instead of just walking away.
Right.
Like sacrificial living looks like the upside down world of what the world would say is right.
Well, I think the whole political scene recently is a great example of that. Right. Sacrificial living in relationships looks like valuing the relationship and the person over their political views. Yeah. So are we willing to, and I'm not talking about like if the person is not reciprocating that and they're being abusive in the way they speak or they're being dismissive of you or whatever, then you don't need to stay in a relationship like that. You need to create some healthy boundaries for yourself. But if it's like, hey, you and I feel really differently about these things, and at the same time, I know your heart, I know that you care about me. You've shown me that through our history. I've shown you through our history. Can we agree that history is not all wiped away just because we view this one moment in time differently?
Right.
Or these set, worldviews look differently, right? Can we agree that we're not going to let those things, it's sacrificing your pride and your ego to say, I'm willing to set aside my pride because I care about you more. And I'm willing to have tension in our relationship. A relationship is meant to have tension. There shouldn't ever be a time really where there's not tension in your relationships to some extent. Because if there's not, either you're not even talking to the person, so there's no space for there to be tension, and then there's not really a relationship, or you're just both lying the whole time and you're just appeasing one another, right? But
like any surface level, right? There's no intimacy there.
Any real relationship that's worth its weight in gold has tension to it to a degree. Our marriage has tension to it because we're two different people. It doesn't mean that we live and we just feed into the tension and we focus on the tension, but there are areas of tension because we're just different people. We're wired differently. It's what gives us it can be our weakness and our strength at the same time. It's what gives us the dynamic that we have. There's tension in parenting. There's tension in your friendships. Like there's a sense of tension because there's like movement happening. Yeah. If there's no movement happening in a relationship, that's really the only place you get like total lack of tension. So I think we've gotten to this place in society where we think tension in a relationship is an indicator of unhealth. And I don't think that's an absolute truth. I think it can be if the relationship is filled with tension, that's not healthy.
Yes.
However, if there's some tension, it just means that you're both comfortable enough to say what's real with each other and feel the safety there. So again, sacrificing our need for comfort in our relationships sometimes looks like this isn't going to always feel easy. And yet I value you more than having an easy friendship or an easy relationship.
And in those times of conflict, what people don't realize is that there is strength that comes from the repair of those relationships. Yeah. The reason we have such a great relationship with our boys, I think, is because we admit when we're wrong and when we mess up and we seek forgiveness of them. Yeah. We don't just say sorry, like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I mean, I think some parents don't even do that. They're too prideful to say that they messed up because they're the parent and what are their kids going to think of them? And it's like, no, like our kids need us to show them examples of repair because they are going to need to repair things because they are broken people.
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we create, when there's not sacrifice, we create this haughtiness, like living on a pedestal type living.
And then they can't live up to that.
People fall from those stages. We're
or
not
they
meant
try
to
to
be
live
there.
up to it, right? You get the kid who either is a really good performer and constantly does everything right, but is actually not doing everything right. They just keep all of their failures to themselves.
Right.
Or the really rebellious kid that's like, well, screw you. I can't be perfect enough for you. So I'm just going to do what I want. And I don't care if it's wrong.
Both are so damaging.
Yeah, both are damaging. And then the cycle just continues, right? If they have kids down the road, then the same things perpetuate. And this is where you get generations to generations of like having the same problems because somebody wouldn't deal with it at some point. So
what about the last section?
What was
sacrifice with ourselves?
Well, I think do you mean with ourselves or like in our relationship with the Lord?
I'm probably saying more with our relationship with the Lord, because we're never really by ourselves.
No. I think,
but it's an internal thing. Yes. It's not involving another human being.
Right. This one, I mean, again, I think if you don't have this one, the others aren't going to really matter. I think everything stems from the heart. So if we're not doing this in our relationship with God, we're really not going to do it well with other people, whether that be our spouse or the relationships outside of that relationship.
Yep.
So I think to that point, it's probably the most important area for us to start this, because you can start it whether your spouse is on board or not. You can be like, all right, Lord, well, I'm going to at least learn what does it mean to live a life of sacrifice with you in my own actions and what I'm doing. And I think, again, this comes with a really high price of saying, I'm going to lay my wants, my desires, my dreams, my ambitions, like that is all a burnt offering to you. Even if they were given by God, God's like, will you, like, I think about Abraham being given Isaac. Like Isaac was a promise from God. He was not something that Abraham obtained by his own means. Like he tried that right. But he is a gift that was directly promised from the Lord to him and Sarah, and Sarah gave birth to Isaac, and Abraham's racing. He's living in the promise of like, this was the dream and I'm living in the dream. And then God asked him to sacrifice the dream, up to the point where like, it was literally the moment before Abraham would have sacrificed Isaac, and God provides a ram in the thicket, right? Sometimes God is asking us to lay on the altar the very thing he gave us and promised us.
Yep.
So is that your dreams for what your life would look like? Is it your dream for what your marriage would look like? Is it your dream for what your kids would look like? Is it your dream for what ministry would look like, or your impact in the world, what it would look like? Maybe you're living in it now and you feel God telling you like, I need you to lay it down. I need you to lay it down because it's become too much. Like it's become to the point where you value that over me, and that's not good for you. And that's not to say that God's actually going to burn it up, but he wants to know, are you willing to, do you trust me enough to put everything on the altar for me?
It reminds me of that worship song, if more of you means less of me, take everything.
Yeah.
Right. It's that mentality of really allowing God into the places that we are holding on to so tight. And some of that is in, like, I think definitely in Western culture, that can be in the way we worship, right? Like, we are gung ho to like cheer for our favorite football team and like raise our hands and
or at a concert or something.
We're at a concert, but God forbid we do that in a church.
Yeah.
And
well, that's just not my style.
That's just not my style. It's
and I'm like,
no.
I get for some people that's true. Like if you're the kind of person that you go to anything and you're just not, I get that not everyone is super expressive. That's not what we're saying, that everyone needs to worship the same way. But I'm like, 80% of the people that say that are like screaming till they have no voice at a concert with Taylor Swift. And I'm like, okay, so what's the difference? Like what's the difference there between lifting your hands and worshiping the Lord with everything you have and, raising your hands to every song, for 2.5 hours and losing your voice? Like that's the part where I'm like, I would just be curious about that. Because again, what are you not willing to sacrifice there?
And I think in those, there's obviously other examples, but in those examples, I remember, as a kid listening to music. Music is such an integral part. We could do a whole podcast about worship and what it is and why it's so integral to us. But I think music is such a way that the Lord always designed us to commune with him. Yeah. And we have false gods and other secular music that met a need that the Lord was supposed to meet. I can't speak words.
The Lord was supposed to meet.
The Lord was supposed to meet that need. Yeah. And so that's why we raise our hands at concerts.
Well, yeah, it's just a natural response, and we could go to a whole thing on the entertainment industry. But
Another podcast.
we'll do that another time.
But also, I think like spiritual disciplines, right?
Yeah.
Reading your Bible, spending time with the Lord, like they're not things that are going to come easily.
Yeah.
Could we have this morning spent time doing other things other than sitting and watching our sermon be preached at our church? Yeah, we could have. And it wouldn't have been wrong. But we chose to dedicate that time to the Lord because we want to show him that he is worthy to us. And we set that example for our kids. And, you know, what was really cool is we didn't tell our kids that they needed to be off their devices or whatever, because this journey of following Jesus is their own, right?
Yeah.
And we chose to do it. But to watch Declan even go in and out of playing his video game and worshiping out of the joy of his heart, like he wasn't doing it out of obligation.
Right. Just because he wanted to.
Yeah, he just sang the parts he wanted to sing and was involved in the parts he wanted to be involved in. And I think that is where it starts, right? Like it starts with us sacrificing in little bits, and the sacrifice that we make personally to commune with the Lord is so valuable. So sacrificial living on your own with the Lord is
the foundation.
It is the foundation, isn't it?
Yeah. So much
good.
more. So much more. That's so good.
So good.
So
Carrie
good.
Garcia, so good.
So good. There's a lot more we could talk about on that, but I don't know. It's given me good things to think about just for myself.
I think this has been a good conversation.
Just continue to process it. So
we're very much in the middle of this. I feel like the Lord revealed some things to us.
It's an in-process
just hanging out here, talking with you guys. And so a couple questions I would ask is, where do you feel uncomfortable in your life? And what do you feel like the Lord is asking you to sacrifice to let him into that discomfort in whatever you're facing? You know, it might be the fact that you feel like you need to fix a problem in your life. And I would just say, have you thought about asking the Lord how he wants to fix it instead of you? You know, like how can we live sacrificially in the things that we do, in the way we commune with him, in the way we commune with others?
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, that's good. Lots to think on.
That's so good.
Lots to chew on. Some good meat to chew on.
Good meat to chew on. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yes, you guys. It's always a pleasure. We just hope that this inspires you, that it encourages you, that it builds you up. Again, you know, share it with people that you feel like could benefit from it or that need it in their life. And as always, feel free if you just need someone to process with, talk with, you have questions about anything that we talked about or anything like that, just feel free to either DM us on Instagram, go to our website. There's a contact us link there. Plenty of you have used that, so feel free to contact us that way too.
Podcast topics that you want to submit to us.
Any and all
love
things.
Those things. So we love you guys.
We love you. Go live today restored.
Bye.
Bye.
Staring out the window pane, the harder that I try